On this episode of Team Building Saves the World.
I'm the checklist guru. I love checklists. I created because I believe that people are the center of everything we do. Sometimes there's a messy middle. There's chaos in creativity. Very important question. This is really important to me. It's become more important the older I get.
So you're telling me your checklist has checklists?
My checklist has checklists. Yes. Yes.
Hello, team. It's me, your old friend Rich Rinnensland, host of Team Building Saves the World. And you can trust me on that. Speaking of trust, on today's episode, we're talking about boosting trust and leadership with the speaker, leadership coach, and author of the 30, 60, 90-day Handbook, a checklist for communications and marketing leaders in higher education, Melissa Farmer Richards. But before we do, I have to share some love with all of my supporters at Team Bonding. If your team is ready to experience teamwork through the power of play, then visit teambonding.com to learn more. Now, team, join me in welcoming to the show the leadership guru, TM, herself, Melissa Farmer Richards. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on. My team out there, meet Melissa Farmer Richards. I want to introduce you to them like we normally do. What made you begin this way? What made you take leadership training to like this point in your life?
So thanks, Rich. It's really an honor to be here and to be invited to be on your podcast. I spent the first 15 years of my career in corporate, specifically managing corporate communications, marketing, and strategic alliances in the technology industry.
Okay.
And then I pivoted to higher education, where I managed communications, marketing, and enrollment for colleges and universities. And about a year and a half ago, I decided that I was at a point in my career where I really wanted to lift up others. I was feeling that there's a potential leadership crisis happening in higher education, not only at the top level, but in middle management as well, right? People are burning out and they are leaving higher education, which I find is really troubling for me. I'm still very passionate about higher education. It changed my life as a first generation college student. So I really set out to help develop the future leaders, current and future leaders. I've been focusing on the higher education space, but also have some clients in the corporate space as well. I facilitate team workshops. I facilitate team communication building, so building out communication norms and helping teams function by communicating well with one another. And also I deliver individual and group leadership coaching.
And you're a published author? Your most recent book, the 30, 60, 90-day Handbook, has that already come out?
Yes, it came out in March. It's published by the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, which is one of the largest professional associations supporting higher education fundraisers, alumni professionals, communications and marketing professionals. So the book is the 30, 60, 90-day Handbook, checklist for communications and marketing leaders in higher education. And I call myself the checklist guru.
I was about to say, I saw on your LinkedIn page that you had it trademarked.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So I'm working on that. Yep. The first step is to file for use, and then you register it as a trademark. So that's
Very
me.
Nice. But in the research we've done on you, we've read how you identified 3 fundamentals of leadership: building trust, earning credibility, and demonstrating commitment. First of all, can you define those for us, and what is it that makes them fundamentals of leadership?
Certainly. So I believe that effective leadership always starts with intentionality, and especially in the first 90 days of a new role.
Okay.
Our resume and our experience get us in the door. I came to higher education, as I mentioned, from the corporate technology industry. Right. I was lucky to get new mentors and sponsors who welcomed me, but I really wish I'd had a handbook, which is why I wrote this book, to help leaders feel prepared when they walk in the door. And so those 3 fundamentals, I find pretty much any leadership trait and characteristic that is important and in leadership will fall into those 3 buckets. So, quick synopsis: building trust starts with relationship building. People trust people. So building relational trust. is really important out of the gate, and it takes commitment, compassion, and communication. Earning credibility is the second one, and earning credibility, again, you come in with your resume and the experience and the credibility that you earned through the process of getting the job, right? The interview process. But it's the actions and evidence that come after that earn credibility.
Okay.
And demonstrating commitment really, in my own words, means you're showing that you're in it to win it, that you are committed to the job because it's something bigger than yourself. And as a leader, it's about helping your team members connect purpose to their work. And that includes empowering them and showing appreciation.
And do you find that these things just, because what it sounds like to me as you're describing it is that it would just be almost like a steamroll effort, that they just feed into each other and help build each other along as you go.
Yes, exactly. Because building trust is ongoing. You start with intentionally trying to build trust by building relationships, but you're earning credibility along the way as you build trust. And then that leads to, once you start showing that you are in it for something bigger than yourself and you are connecting purpose to people's work, that's the demonstrating commitment part.
Okay. And what would you recommend as a good starting point? How do you show the people, because you can say whatever you like, especially in that interview process. But once you have hit the ground running, how do you show them that is the best, you're making your best start?
It starts with empathy, which includes listening.
Okay.
Listening to others, showing respect for the history. Sometimes as leaders, we're brought in to make change, but that doesn't mean that we should come in like a bull in a china shop, right? We need to understand what the culture of the place and really engage with the people and understand and show respect for the history that came before you. And it's only after that you do that work that you can bring people along with you in change.
Okay. And you break it down into the 30, 60, 90. What do those individual time periods, what are the differences you find in them and what are the similarities that have to continue throughout?
Okay. So the three fundamentals of leadership: build trust, earn credibility, demonstrate commitment. And because I'm the checklist guru, I love checklists, I created 4 steps for each one. So building trust is about being consistent. It's about evoking empathy and utilizing transparency and communicating well. And that, again, is you're taking the time with individuals to get to know them and building that relational trust. That's so important. Again, people trust people, and you cannot build organizational trust unless you start with relational trust. Earning credibility, again, is about engaging others. It's about taking responsibility. It's about committing to learning and delivering results. But again, that engaging others that's that bridge between building trust and earning credibility. It's very people-centered, this approach that I've developed.
Okay.
Because I believe that people are the center of everything we do in an organization. And so finally, demonstrating commitment. It's about being the mission, living the mission, whether it's for a corporate entity, a nonprofit, or a higher education institution. It's living that mission and helping your team connect purpose to their work. And it's about guiding accountability, living, holding yourself accountable, but also guiding your team towards accountability. It's about showing up and following through on what you say you're going to do. And it's about appreciating your team and giving appreciation.
Okay. You, in that, mentioned my absolute favorite buzzword that I listen for almost every episode that I've done so far in the 6 years we've been doing this podcast: empathy. It seems to be a lot of people's linchpin ideal, but it also seems to be impossible to teach it. So can you give me your example? Because I come from a generation where, and I've talked about this with so many people, where when I started off in middle management in the business sectors, umpteen years ago, that empathy product, that empathy motive was not only unheard of, it was almost discouraged. That if you wanted to succeed, you kind of had to forget everybody else to make yourself get a little higher and higher in the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we teach what is, to me, really an ineffable quality?
Yeah, so let me start by sharing a quick story.
Please.
I once had a boss who I was trying to coach him on adding empathy to his communications.
Wow. Okay.
And encourage and supporting that. And he told me that he couldn't write what he didn't feel.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's and also I think a lot of people feel like they're managing a lot of chaos and they find it difficult to evoke empathy or have compassion when people are complaining or, trying to punch holes in things that they don't understand. And what's really important to learn in that is that empathy isn't always natural, but you can be committed through curiosity and through your care for others to learning and practicing empathy, right? It includes practicing active listening. Mm-hmm. It includes engaging in the experiences of others and being curious to hear their perspective. It doesn't mean that they're going to always change your mind or that there's a right or a wrong or a black and a white, right? It just means that you're continuing to learn and you're committed to learning what you don't know. And that includes other people's perspectives and other people's experiences that they bring to the table. And for me, that's the core to leading a people-centered organization and being a people-centered leader.
Fantastic. Okay. Switching gears just a little bit. How do we create a high-performing creative team when working with some limited resources?
Right. Okay. So high-performing creative teams, I am lucky in my leadership to have had managed many high-performing creative teams and professionals. And I believe that high performers, especially creative professionals, enjoy space for give and take. Okay. They enjoy learning from one another. Okay. And so that is characteristic of a growth mindset, and it's passion for always wanting to get to do things better rather than just simply getting the job done. Create high performing professionals, especially creative professionals, aim for excellence. And that's a beautiful thing. But it can also be messy. Right? Sometimes there's a messy middle. There's chaos in creativity, but there's beauty in the end. And so because high-performing creative professionals aim for that continuous improvement, they crave feedback and appreciation. So as leaders, we need to create space for that. I've always tried to foster healthy collaboration between team members, helping coach them on how to give creative and constructive feedback to one another and create psychologically safe spaces for them to share feedback. Yeah. It also means dedicating time for creative thinking. So I remember back during the pandemic, we were all just, you remember, right? How crazy it was. We felt like we were doing 10 jobs on top of managing a global pandemic and worried about our own health. And that, for creative professionals, we lost the one-on-one interactions we were having in the workplace because we were all working from home. And so one of the things that we did as a team is that we set aside a block of time every week. We put it on the calendar. Sometimes we would get together and have just free form creative discussions. Other times we would use that as individual time for us to just think creatively, stop what we're working on, go out, explore other people's websites, read magazines, watch videos. I would often send some ideas, some prompts to people for things that they could explore during that time. But as managing high performing creative teams, it's important as a manager to realize that people need that space and for creating and for thinking.
Especially to come to realize, creating itself literally means building something from nothing.
Yes.
So, and if you don't have the freedom to explore in that kind of space, that kind of setting, then what are you really going to get out of it?
Exactly.
Okay. But then we're going to kind of face the other way where, at some point your team might realize the thing they're trying to create isn't going to work, at least not in the
Mm-hmm.
way that they've been building towards. We always call that fake it till you make it philosophy. So is that something that they should be given the freedom for, or is it something that we need to nip in the bud faster than usual?
So I see it as a little bit, I mean, fake it till you make it. I want to be known for destroying that phase, that phrase.
Okay.
I believe you shouldn't fake it. You should learn it.
Okay.
And that rather than just pretending that you know what you're doing, like be honest with people. And that's part of trust building, is being honest about what you know and what you don't know. I think that phrase actually evolved because of the stigma that, there's a stigma associated with acknowledging that you don't know everything.
Right.
But as leaders, we shouldn't know everything. We should be smart enough to hire people who bring different skill sets to the table, and we have to be okay by saying that we're still learning on the job. And again, that's how you earn respect and credibility, when you're honest about what you know and what you don't know. And so as leaders, we can also instill that in others. We shouldn't create spaces that make people feel that they're not good enough and that it's perfect. Everything has to be perfect. I also have a high disregard for toxic perfectionism, right? As creators, sometimes we're not always going to get it right.
Yeah.
We're going to get it wrong sometimes, and we need to be okay with that. And creativity is a process. So it's a learning process, and we should be learning together as we create beautiful things.
Just when you were saying that, it reminds me of my favorite quote from Bob Ross, the Learn to Paint gentleman. It was on PBS for all those years, who said there's no such thing in art as a mistake. There's just happy accidents.
Yes.
Now that you put the paint where it's not supposed to be, what can you make from the paint that you put there? Great. But this can often lead to, especially in a business community or a mindset, and higher education, I'm certain as well, crises.
Yes.
They're going to come. Everybody's going to have them, even as I was saying, that one example of we're building towards something. Oh, but wait, there's no way we can get where we want to be. How do we know, or how can we even give the freedom to know that we're heading in that direction before it's too late? And what can leaders do to make sure that their teams have that freedom of expression?
So one of the workshops that I facilitate now in my business is around communication norms.
Okay.
So helping teams understand their best practices for communicating well with one another.
Okay.
And it starts with individual communication preferences, right? So understanding that one person on the team really hates to be interrupted. It throws off their day. So please schedule an appointment with them.
Okay.
Someone else might be the person who's bouncing around and they love just popping into people's offices and sharing ideas and that water cooler talk. Other people may prefer email. Other people may prefer Slack messages. So it starts with understanding those personal communication preferences, and then understanding how you communicate as a team. So how are you using tools to communicate about projects? What happens when a project starts to go off the rails? And it's, how do you communicate early with one another in healthy ways that foster an environment where it's okay and people aren't devastated and feel personally responsible. Right? They're motivated to move the project forward and get it back on track.
Can you give me an example that you've experienced either? And again, you don't have to share names. I don't, need to know whom you've worked with throughout the years. I was looking again at both your website and your LinkedIn, and the list is mountainous and highly impressive of the people that you worked with over the years. But give me an example of when you have seen this work. and how did it look? How did it come across to you?
Well, I mean, we can take the example, go back to the pandemic as an
Sure.
example of a major crisis that we were all dealing with. So not
Yep.
just, a team project crisis. This was a major global crisis affecting everyone.
And talk about having to learn new ways of communication. My goodness.
Yes. Yes. So the three stages of any crisis that I adhere to is readiness, response, and recovery. And the readiness is it's all that preparation you do. Now, none of us were fully and adequately prepared for a global pandemic going forward. I hope that we will be. But, any communications manager at an organization should have at least the initial skeleton of a crisis communications plan in place. So that's the readiness, right? Documenting your workflows and procedures, having that plan, going through tabletop exercises to prepare for different scenarios, creating your checklist. Because when a crisis happens that's immediate, you want to be able to pull that out of the drawer. And that also is important for teams, because you want to have operating procedures as a team so that everyone can go back to one place and know exactly where you are, what they should be doing. Everybody wants to help. They want to know what their role is. So make sure that you have that defined up front. And then the response stage, of course, is like when the crisis is happening, how are you responding to it well? And of course, you should be putting safety and people first, followed by business continuity. And then the third stage is recovery. It's the immediate crisis may be over, but people are still reeling, right? This goes back again to people-centered leadership, recognizing that people go through the different stages of a crisis with different emotions at different speeds. And I have an analogy that I use called the bridge analogy. So as a communicator, regardless of how big or how small the crisis, people are going to be going through those stages at different speeds.
True.
As a leader, we can't just run across the bridge. If we're all on one side of a cavern, imagine that we're all standing on one side of a cavern. There's a swinging bridge that goes across to the other side. As a leader, we shouldn't run across the bridge to the other side and then shout back, "Follow me."
Right.
Like that's not an effective way. We have to usher people through those stages, and using effective communications is a healthy way to do that. So we have to recognize that there are going to be people who are going to run across the bridge ahead of us. There are going to be people who are going to go with us. There are going to be people who stop in their tracks halfway across the bridge because they're terrified.
Right.
And there are going to be people who don't even put a foot on the bridge because they feel that they're safe where they are and they're not going to the other side. So we have to usher people across. And so again, regardless of how big or small the crisis, that should be our focus as leaders, is ushering people.
It sounds to me like you're saying, almost like back in my day, I did a lot of corporate security work. And just as an example out of my own personal history, is the fire alarm drills that you would have once a month, once every other month, whatever it happened to be for your personal business. The objective is not only to teach people where they need to go and how they need to get there and when they can come back in, and to look at, but the doing it over and over and over again takes the panic out of it.
Yes, the repetitive nature.
Yes. Is that something you recommend for leadership?
Yes, absolutely. It becomes, as you said, it takes the panic out because it becomes second nature to you. Nice. So that's, for major crises, you're mapping out scenarios that could happen, whether it's a fire or, God forbid, a death or whatever any kind of crisis you can imagine.
Right.
You should be talking through those scenarios and how you will respond to them if they happen.
Now let's turn the mirror around, as it were. How can a leader make sure that while they are doing the best they can to maintain the people under them and the auspices that they have to oversee, how can they make sure they're also taking care of themselves?
Very important question. This is really important to me. It's become more important the older I get.
I hear you.
But it is, I think it's so important that we make time for our whole selves.
Okay.
And as leaders, we're respecting that of others, right? We want to bring our whole selves to work, mentally, physically, professionally. And so we should be taking care of ourselves mentally, physically, and professionally. It's all the things that we've heard, and it's hard, they're easier to say than to practice, but it's eating healthy, drinking water, finding your secret sleep number. Mine is 7 hours of sleep at night, by the way. And I wake up, I'm a morning person. I wake up without an alarm clock between 5:30 and 6, and which is I love waking up naturally that way. So, sleeping with the curtains open and waking up to the sunlight. And it's about getting up and moving. And it's also about establishing your network of people who support you. So your friends, your family, your mentors, and learning how to lean on them when you need them. For some people, just asking is difficult. So it's important to know how to ask for help and support when you need it. And I often, when I'm coaching one-on-one clients, I talk to them about it's important to clarify your ask of people, right? So I just need you to listen, or I need your feedback, or I just need a hug, right? So like communicating what that care looks like and what you need in that moment.
I recommend you check with HR on that last one.
Yeah, that's right. You definitely have to ask for the hug. Make sure that people want the hug before you give it to them. But I think this also goes back to something we were talking about earlier, about perfectionism and toxic perfectionism. Knowing that perfection is not the goal. Taking care of yourself doesn't mean that I went and worked out every single day, and then I missed a day. So it's all over. All that's in vain, and I'm a failure, right? Right. It's about taking one step at a time and having consistency, and just every day is a new day. And that's part of the growth mindset, and a new day mindset is waking up and saying, today's a new day that I can refocus and take care of myself.
How can leaders check in with themselves enough to know where they are in the spectrum of it? Because you're going to have those leaders who, and this was something that I was actually accused of back in my corporate career days, was taking too much on yourself. And then you find out that the people who are under you are like, well, he can take care of it, so he's going to take care of it, and I don't have to now. Or on the other end, you just have those managers that are like, you're going to do what I say because I told you to do it, and you get a paycheck every week, and that's why we're here. How can you help the leader to help themselves to find where they are and how to get more in center of the balance?
Well, micromanagement is very unhealthy.
Sure.
Right? If you're taking it on all yourself, you should rather, instead of doing that, you should be building a team that's well balanced, that in the areas, once you've recognized the areas that are not your strengths, you're hiring other people who have those strengths and bring them to the table. And as a leader, we have to stop and reflect about when we're doing too much. When things feel heavy and we need to ask for help, when we are not maximizing our strengths. There are a number of ways that are helpful for people. Reflection, meditation and reflection are important. That's a skill that I've learned has been really helpful later in my leadership. I think when I was young, I was, trying to climb the ladder, learn things, keep moving up. And I was not taking the time to sit back and reflect on how I might have done something differently, or how I might have connected with other people to learn different perspectives. So sometimes it's just sitting and taking that quiet time. Some people like to journal. Some people like that quiet reflection. I'm a learner, and I love to consume content. I'm always reading. I'm a
Nice.
big believer in having reading materials in my bag, no matter where I am. So I'm always reading magazines and books and articles, and so that and I take notes and I write in the margins. And so for me, that's a great way for me to help like assure that I'm on track and achieving my goals. But also sometimes it takes another person to remind you that you're pushing yourself too hard.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any kind of, besides just like somebody who knows you well enough to be able to say to you, you're working too hard, or
yes,
conversely, you're working them too hard?
Yes, exactly. We need accountability partners, not just holding ourselves accountable, but we need accountability partners, and we need to invite them into our network. So whether it is a peer, if you're high up on the leadership ladder, you might say to your peer, can we be accountability partners with one another to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves? And that might look like in action, that might mean that we're going to take a walk every afternoon at 3:00 for 20 minutes together.
Nice.
And we're not going to talk about work. We're going to talk about something else that we love, about the concerts that we like to go to, or where we had dinner last that had a really amazing meal. So finding those people, and then also building that in your team as well, so that there are healthy checks and balances for team members, so that people on the team feel comfortable looking at one another and saying, you know what? For some reason this week, your plate is really full. I have some bandwidth. How can I help you?
Nice. Excellent. Now, you call yourself the checklist guru, as we've already gone. You're trademarking it. I love that. How effective are checklists, or how, I don't want to say married to checklists, should they be? Do you find that people can too easily go overboard with them, or just quickly pass them by the wayside?
Yes, of course. I mean, I know people who say that they are just overwhelmed by their checklist. It's too long. And so my advice is always to break it down. And I've even coached some people on sort of the 2 tasks a day rule. So use Post-it notes. Identify 2 things that have to get done today, because that feels manageable, right?
Right.
Break them down onto separate Post-it notes. And at the end of the day, when you've done it, crinkle it up and throw it away. And there's satisfaction in that too. And then it's not this overwhelming 5-page to-do list that we all have. I actually break my list down. I have a weekly priorities list, and then I have a daily priorities list. So I'm sort of moving things around.
So you're telling me your checklist has checklists?
My checklist has checklists. Yes, exactly. But I've always loved checklists. Even it goes back to my high school days of getting my homework done. I would come home and make a checklist of my homework, and then and if there's science in that, right? Our brains release dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that's referred to as your body's reward center, right? So it's and when you check off that list, we're hardwired to seek out those actions that stimulate the dopamine, and checking off the list is one of those.
And I had a romantic partner back in the day who was so into checklists. I was giggling because you said use Post-it notes. She would literally line the entirety of her computer. You could, that one or 2 days, you couldn't see the screen too clearly because there were just overlapping yellow tiny squares surrounding the entirety. How do we teach ourselves not to get lost in the minutia and still keep the bigger picture in mind?
Yeah, so your checklist is really those are your tasks.
Okay.
So and your tasks should always roll up to bigger goals.
Okay.
So thinking about what your goals are for the week or for the month or for the year, depending on your area of focus. As an entrepreneur now, I'm thinking about what are my annual business goals, but I'm also thinking about what I want to get done this month.
Okay.
I think about, chunks of time and how I will plan for that and manage for that chunk of time. And so checklists are Again, it breaks down the goals into smaller, manageable steps and helps keep me satisfied as I make progress towards those goals.
Nice, nice. Finally, I just want to ask for those leaders out there who are hearing everything we say, but they might not feel like that we're speaking directly to them. Maybe they think that, nope, I'm pretty much right there in the middle. I can handle the complex. I can handle the day-to-day. I create open spaces, the freedom and the emotional well-being that people have, that they can express to me and I can express back to them. What are some other mistakes that you have seen that they might go, oh, that one's me. That's what I'm looking for. And how can we get them past that?
I think one mistake that we've all made as leaders is we make assumptions about people and about situations. And so that is just a great reminder for people to listen, to be curious about the other humans that you're working with. Ask them how they feel, ask them open-ended questions, invite them to contribute their perspective and experiences that may not be so obvious in their job titles. One of my favorite questions when I lead team workshops is when I have people introduce themselves at the beginning, I ask them not to use their job title. I ask them to tell me what they do without using their job title. And the fascinating thing is that they learn a lot from one another.
Nice.
Because they've never taken time to share, and you'll hear people talk about connecting themselves to bigger purpose, or you'll hear them share some talents that you didn't even realize that they had and were quietly associating with their job and their position. So, my advice to leaders is to try to draw that out of people, ask them curious questions, invite them. They may not have the authority to be invited to the decision-making table, but that's okay. We still want to hear from people and we want to hear their reactions so that we can better engage them.
Fantastic. Melissa, thank you so much. I appreciate this whole conversation. But I do want to say the 30, 60, 90-day handbook, checklist for communications and marketing leaders in higher education. Where can people find it and where can they find out more about you?
So they can find the book on the Council for Advancement and Supportive Education.
Okay.
Which is the acronym is CASE, CASE.org.
Nice.
The online bookstore there is where they can find the book. And it actually comes with a companion workbook.
Oh, awesome.
So because, again, I'm a list maker and I like writing in margins. So we designed a workbook so people could actually, create their own 30, 60, 90-day lists. Excellent. Using the checklist. And they can learn more about me on my website, imarketingmix.com, and also on LinkedIn as Melissa Farmer Richards. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and if you reach out to me, I will respond.
Fantastic. Melissa Richards, thank you very much. My team out there, give Melissa a huge round of applause. Thank you again for coming on. Did you have fun?
I did. It was great. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad, and I hope you continue to feel that way. Because it's time for my speed round. Okay, Melissa, I discussed this a little bit with you in the beginning before we came on with the team, but just to make you aware, all this is 60 seconds of music that keeps me in track of the time. I'm going to ask you a complete series of innocuous questions. They're just silly little things right off the top of a checklist that I've created for myself.
Yay!
The objective here is to see how many you can answer within 60 seconds. That way we get to know you a little bit better, and if you're feeling competitive at all, because this is a game, we're trying to beat 17 questions.
Okay.
60 seconds.
All right, I'm ready.
All right? Okay. Then as soon as we hear the music, I'm going to ask you the first question, and away we go. What's your name?
Melissa Richards.
Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
What is your most memorable concert experience?
My first concert, which was REM.
Nice. What would you like your last meal to be, God forbid?
Barbecue chicken.
Ooh, excellent. Would you rather be able to talk to animals or speak every human language?
Talk to animals.
Best career advice you have ever received?
Oh, you keep cash in your wallet for tipping when you travel.
How do you unwind after a busy or stressful day?
I take a walk.
If you could work remotely from anywhere in the world, where would you be?
Hawaii.
Most unusual job you've ever had?
Camp counselor.
What job would you be absolutely terrible at?
Anything that includes science.
Favorite vacation spot?
Hawaii.
You got 11, my friend.
Oh.
You got 11. That's very good. That's very, very good. I would call that the higher end of average for what we've had. Melissa, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate you being here with me.
Appreciate the invitation. It was really a lot of fun. Great discussion.